From a results standpoint, not good. I've said time and time again that a part of me has died in that I am about results. And maybe the romantic part of me has died. See, but figure out a way to get it done, even with the difficulty of a new team coming together. It should be said also that Slovenia was also young, inexperienced, and not their quote unquote first team. So they should have no excuses. I thought the first half was worse than the second half, and that often happens when you grow into a game. We'll go through everything, but just general thoughts. Uninspired for much of the game until maybe the second half. Of the second half, nobody really stood out. There were a couple of good performances, nobody elite, nobody great in the way that they performed, and a game that I think will not be remembered for anything that happened on the field, and I don't think ultimately is cause for concern. But I know and I'm sure many of you out there were at least expecting more. All right, so that's the top level analysis. We'll get into a little bit of the other stuff. Mosse, initial instant reaction thoughts to this game.
Even by January camp standards, there was a feeling of pointlessness hanging over this match. And I know Casey Keller has spoken about how the more U.S. players go to Europe, it's going to increasingly feel that way with this January camp that occurs outside of FIFA window. The only thing that gave it some sense of purpose for me was the Olympics. So I was much more interested in the Olympic age players, Diego Luna, Atencio, Aiden Morris, the guys that came on in the second half, Duncan Maguire, Barek Terovic, McGlynn, Caleb Wiley, etc. I was less interested in Brian White, Timothy Tillman, Shaq Moore, because I don't think I saw anybody on this field, with the possible exception of Miles Robinson, who's obviously an outlier. He was the one truly established player in this roster. I didn't see anybody that I think could contribute anything at the Copa America, but I did see some players who could be interesting for the Olympics, particularly since, remember, the Copa America is going to be the priority. So you got to see what that roster looks like and what's left over for the Olympics. And then clubs are not obligated to release players for the Olympics. So you're going to run into some issues there. So you're going to have to dig deep into the talent pool. And so I think some of the players we saw on the field today could definitely factor in the Olympics.
All right, so you mentioned a couple different players there. I thought that of the players that had good games, again, nobody with a great game, Diego Luna continues to be interesting in that he is a little unique and different relative to many players that we have, both in terms of his stature and the way that he plays. My question, and I guess the problem or challenge for Diego Luna is, does he play or want to play in a certain way that, one, he is able to do individually? I even have questions about that. But two, is this team under Greg Berhalter, or anybody for that matter, focused on playing like that? And it could be a square peg in a round hole type of situation with him. But some of the individual moments of skill and vision, wonderful to see. I didn't think Tillman was bad. At times I thought he was good. I thought Jones over there on the left-hand side. I didn't think Shaq Moore had a good game. Kamunga missed the chance, but he also lost the ball on the goal ultimately. Didn't think he was good. And then I thought that Schulte, when he goes back and looks at that goal, will want that back in terms of the relatively benign angle that it ultimately came from. One of his defenders tracking down, and then it was a nice finish, but you got to be able to do better in that position. There's somewhere you just raise your hand and say, hey, nothing you can do there. I think Schulte will look back and say, I could have done better. When you see what the U.S. has to offer at a young and inexperienced level, and you put it up against what many have said is a new and brave new world of development and much more nurturing and fertile type of land that we have to develop these players, does it give you pause when you see something like this today?
A little bit, in the sense that, as we've talked about, there are some people that view the Pulisic, McKinney, Adams, Reyna group as a golden generation, and then there are others that feel like, no, it's the new normal, and the U.S. has figured out player development, and they're going to start pumping out players like that on a consistent basis like the elite soccer nations do. And so I'm kind of looking at games like today through that lens and seeing the younger players coming up. Are they of the same level of Pulisic, Reyna, McKinney, and Adams? But both because, you want to build up the depth for 2026, and also beyond this generation, you're wondering, is there something coming up behind it that's going to be able to build on the momentum of whatever achievements this current group manages? So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess it is an open question as to whether this younger group coming up behind those guys, is it as good as it should be? Is it not? Is there some concern about that?
Look, this could change when the Olympics show up this summer, but as I said before, there should be no sacred cows out there. Everybody, as good as they are, and maybe they are a golden generation, but I want that golden generation to hopefully feel some sort of sense of pressure and competition, and a next generation, I guess, standing on their shoulders and coming up and wanting to take it away. That's how it should work. But today did not give me hope. I haven't lost all hope, but today certainly did not give me hope that that is necessarily happening going forward. But who knows? 2024 is going to be really interesting, both on and off the field from an American soccer perspective. Mosse, if we start to push this forward for this team this year in 2024 and then beyond, how confident and comfortable are you with where this U.S. men's national team is right now under Greg Berhalter? When you take into all the different talent that we have out there, obviously all the drama that played out over last year in terms of coming back to, I guess it would be Greg Berhalter. And I say that only because, and we do kind of say it jokingly, but behind the joke, there is an element of, I guess, wishful thinking and reality. When someone like Jose Mourinho loses his job, immediately people say, hey, he's sitting out there. And I know the cost would be ridiculous, but do you see, if you look into your crystal ball over this next year, anything happening, and certainly after today's game, that monumental in terms of a change being made? I know we said that a massive failure this summer in the Copa America, I've said at least, could certainly trigger that type of change. But as you look at it, is this ship sailed? Is this sailing in the right direction for you relative to this summer and then obviously 2026?
I've said before, I think it would have to be a complete disaster this summer, meaning group stage exit, for Berhalter to be at any risk of losing his job. I think some people are projecting their opinions onto Matt Crocker about what he needs to do. I don't get the sense that Matt Crocker, after going through that, what he claims was an exhaustive process, and choosing Berhalter to lead the team for another cycle into the 2026 World Cup, would pull the plug on it right away just by a bad quarterfinal exit at the Copa America. I don't know. I could be wrong. That's just my sense of it. But I will say, I mentioned this in a previous spaces. I don't want to go all in on this take yet. I'm just kind of flicking the jab here. But you and I were initially against bringing Berhalter back because we're not fans of coaches doing 2 cycles in a row. And then when the Gio thing happened, I know you especially felt like, well, that's the wrong reason for him to not get the job. So then you moved into the camp of wanting him to remain the coach. Now that the dust has settled on the Gio situation, some of the reasons why I was against Berhalter coming back are sort of creeping back in. There is just a staleness so far to Berhalter 2.0. And I'm curious to see how it feels, like I said, in March in the Nations League Final Four, and obviously in the Copa America, if it's going to feel that way or not, if it's just sort of a wrong impression I'm getting right now. But there's just a little bit of that creeping in, just watching him on the sideline for these games. I can't put my finger on it, but you seem to be nodding, so you kind of get where I'm going.
That is a completely fair analysis, and I think at least I think it's a common reaction, and I feel what you are saying right now. Not to the point of you need to fire Greg Berhalter, but there is a feeling of him needing to do something more, him needing to actually show that he has changed, that he has evolved, and that this is a new and improved Greg Berhalter. And we have yet to actually see that, but it has to show up. And I think it has to show up sooner rather than later. You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops twice a week right here on my very own YouTube page. The only way to stay up to date is to hit that subscribe button down below. Size the day, and see you soon.